is an organization that Circle Sanctuary helped birth many years ago. In fact, it's 25 years ago this month that Lady Liberty League took form. And so in doing this talk today, it's part to share some information about not only what we do. I'm Executive Director of Lady Liberty League, and Jerry is the Managing Director. And she's also helping with our media today as well. And 25 years ago this month, we were coming into being because for the very first time in American history, Congress was attempting to pass laws that would have taken away religious freedom for pagans, Wiccans, and witches. So I'm going to begin the talk by doing an invocation of Lady Liberty, and then I'm going to tell the tale of 25 years ago, a close encounter of an interesting kind with Senator... Oh, oh, you know what? I don't know if he has either.
I don't think he did.
Oh, okay. Can you tell?
Yeah, I think your recording has got the red dot on top.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yes, I guess it's on automatic, right? Where do we get Lady Liberty from? Lady Liberty is a pagan goddess. Ancient Rome. Her name, Libertas, means freedom. And she not only was honored in pagan Rome, but she has become an international, interreligious, and multicultural form of the divine. She not only is a symbol of America and America freedom, but she is a symbol for freedom in many parts of the world. So I'm wondering if you all would join me in honoring her. Yes, I have props. This torch of freedom, let it illuminate us today as we visit the concept of freedom in America and freedom amongst the nature peoples, amongst the witches, the Wiccans, the Druids, the heathens, and the other people who celebrate the ways of nature. So if you wish to join me in calling her presence here by her old pagan name, Libertas, I invite you to chant Libertas with me 3 times. Libertas! 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 We greet you, we honor you, we welcome you here. Lady Liberty, Goddess of Freedom, Libertas, be with us, guide us, bless us as we explore your realm of rights and freedom for the nature people. So mote it be. People have been looking at pagan rights in America in many ways over recent years, but the story about contemporary work for pagan rights goes back many, many years to older forms of paganism. And I'd like to start the tale of how we came to form Lady Liberty League by actually talking a little bit about American history. When people think about the founding of America, there's a thinking about people of different religious beliefs and cultures and folk traditions that came to America in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, even to the present day, for a variety of reasons. But some of those people came because their religion was being persecuted, and they were being persecuted. People know about the founding of Massachusetts, the Mayflower, Plymouth Rock. Know about the Pilgrims and the Puritans. But how many people know the story of Marymount? Yes, if you go down right here in Salem town, or Salem City if you prefer, to the House of the Seven Gables and go to the gift store. There you can obtain a book called The Twice Told Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And in that book you will see the tale of the Maypole and Marymount. Now, is this based on fact? Is there fiction woven into the mix? I'll let you determine that. But it's a piece of Americana that isn't always taught these days, and it hasn't been taught for a while. You have to really dig into the literature of the time. Not all people who came to America for religious freedom were Christian. Not all peoples who were in America trying to get religious freedom were Christians. Native Americans had their own traditional ways here, and there were many different tribes rather than one great form of religion called Native American religion. No, each tribe had its own form of traditional ways. So Native Americans had some of their ways disrespected, and some of the people that brought over some of the survivals of pagan folk traditions had their ways of celebration disrespected. Yes, there was a Maypole in Marymount, a community right in Massachusetts. Did they have fun? Yes. Did they have a Lord and Lady of the May? Yes. Did the neighbors who were Puritan have a hard time embracing their right for religious freedom and cultural celebration? Yes. What happened? Well, they did not like the fact that the people were cavorting around the Maypole, did not like the idea they were cavorting with Native Americans, and so there was some racism going on here as well. And there was clearly a lack of respect for these old folk ways. In fact, just as maypoles in the 1600s were cut down across England, the maypole at Marymount was cut down as well. I'll let you all go and research this tale on the internet, or make that trip to the House of Seven Gables bookstore or some other place and to actually get the whole tale. But I share that tale to help counter a big misconception about America to begin with, that it is a so-called Christian nation. Never was, is not now, and is not likely to be in the future. And I have no disrespect for Christianity as a form of religion. I do have some problems with people who are claiming to be Christian that are doing what, in my opinion, are some very un-Christian-like things. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, do unto others as you have them do unto you. He did not say, go and persecute people who are different. He did not say, burn witches, hang witches, throw witches in jail. No, it was about love. And unfortunately, some of the things that happened in older times where the nature peoples who were keeping alive old ways were persecuted, some of those ways have continued on in different parts of the world. If you want to hear what happened when fear and prejudice and religious fanaticism all got into a mix, 1692, go to the Salem Witch Museum. There you will not only get a very in-depth and view of what has happened, get the historical facts, but you will have a context of what happens when things such as persecution and fear, driven by fanaticism, is on the loose. And I think one of the good things that can come out of doing this talk right here in Salem is the fact that when terrible things happen, we can't change that they've happened, but we can look at the story of what happens, not only then, but what happens in the aftermath. And I want to give thanks to the Salem Witch Museum and those who have advised the Salem Witch Museum for not only telling the tale, but talking about how that applies to people today. And there's 2 exhibits. You go into the exhibit on 1692, and then you go into Who Are the Witches exhibit, and there they not only talk about different words connected with the word witch and different concepts, but also looking at some of the people who use witch today, including Wiccans and Pagans. And so there's positive interpretation of pagan culture and its old roots and right into contemporary times. And I think that is so refreshing. But perhaps one of my favorite pieces about that particular sharing of history is, as you conclude the exhibit, it takes a look at other things that have happened in America since the Salem witch hunts. And while it wasn't fully comprehensive of all the so-called witch hunts that are going on, clearly the message is we really need to look at fear. We need to look what happens when fear gets triggered. We need to look at scapegoating, and we really need to wake up and draw some lessons from this. Salem is such a great place to be. Here we are, 25 years from the introduction of what was known as the Helms Amendment and its defeat. On September 26, 1985, on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., a powerful and influential senator from North Carolina by the name of Jesse Helms introduced Amendment 705, which was an amendment to a postal appropriations bill that needed to be enacted into law because it not only funded the Postal Service but some other government agencies for the following year. So it had to be passed. And one of the things that has happened in American government is from time to time amendments get attached to bills that have to get passed in order to get them through. With so much information to look at, reflect on, and make decisions on, not all senators and congresspeople track all the amendments and all the pieces of legislation. All the U.S. senators that were in session on September 26 of 1985 voted unanimously without debate to approve Amendment 705, which would have taken away tax-exempt status from Wiccan churches. What does that mean? That means our churches are no longer having the same rights as churches of other religions. How can this be? Doesn't our Constitution guarantee us religious freedom, separation of church and state, freedom of worship? The government shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Where was that? Why did senators who were sworn to uphold the Constitution vote for a piece of legislation which would have taken away rights from a minority within society? Helms used a tactic that had been used for hundreds of years. He threw Satan in the mix, criminal devil worship in the mix, stirred up some powerful emotions, and as proof that Wiccans had tax-exempt status, pulled out a letter from then Secretary of the Treasury, James Baker III, that says, yes, no, Wiccan churches have tax-exempt status, 501c3 status. Well, it was taken out of context. Baker was basically saying, yes, they're entitled to it, but it was used in a context to encourage people to take away our tax-exempt status. I was speaking on a campus at a pagan gathering called the Harvest Moon Celebration that year, just a few miles from Hollywood and Los Angeles. Someone who had been connecting with some people in Washington, D.C. got word, came into the festival, told us the news, and as a result of that news break, I decided it was time to get busy. Someone up on Capitol Hill, who was then with American Civil Liberties Union, a person by the name of Barry Lynn, did his best to try to defeat that legislation and to talk to various people up on Capitol Hill. But at that time in American history, there was something called the so-called moral majority. It wasn't moral, and I don't think it was a majority. But there was an aspiration to try to legislate a particular sectarian, limited, religious political viewpoint in America. So this amendment made it through the Senate and was headed to being law. And if you know your American government, you know that when one bill has been introduced in both houses of Congress, you've got the House getting one version of the bill and the Senate getting another version of the bill. They go to a joint conference committee, and there at that committee, the senators and the Congress people from each of the houses, and there's a small collection of people that are on that conference committee, will look at the bill and its amendments and decide what amendments to keep and what amendments to get rid of, and they bring the two versions of the bill into the final version, and then it goes into the next range of approval, which can easily pass into law, unless they decide to kill it in committee, which it could be. Well, this was a postal appropriations bill. That wasn't going to die in committee, but fortunately, the amendment was stripped away. What did it take to get rid of something that the entire U.S. Senate that was in session had unanimously voted to put onto this? It took a lot of people expressing a lot of concerns directly to senators and Congress people. There was networking in an age before email was widespread, before blogs, before websites were widespread and in common use. Even before faxes were that well used. People wrote letters, sent telegrams, used the phone, and there was a great outpouring of concern over 1 month's time. So we're in the middle of that anniversary month. And part of the reason for suggesting I do this presentation as part of Witch City Expo being done by the World of Witches Museum is that this is a piece of American history a lot of people don't even know happened. I've been speaking at Pagan Pride events as well as at other gatherings over the last few months, and I've had people raise their hands if they've heard of this particular tale, and I've been amazed that very few people were around then and had heard of it. And it is a very small piece of American history, but I think it's an important piece of American history, not just because the networking that happened gave rise to the Lady Liberty League, but it was a time when people who were of different witchcraft, Wiccan, and other pagan traditions not only joined together in a common cause, but people from other religions and philosophies all converged to work together and to raise their voices for freedom, to raise their voices for separation of church and state, to raise their voices so that pagan and Wiccan rights would be upheld. So within 1 month's time, myself and other people connected with the Lady Liberty League in its infancy at that point. We were all part of Circle Sanctuary. We were people that did the networking of Circle Network. And we sent letters out, thousands of letters out. We called people. We called Capitol Hill and talked to various people there. We specifically spent time connecting with the people who were in the states of the members of the Joint Conference Committee so that constituents would be directly talking to specific individuals that were going to consider this piece of legislation. Well, for the first 2 weeks, there was nothing but outcry from pagans and people of other faith traditions and philosophies, because we had atheists and agnostics joining us too. And then all of a sudden, some of the forces that had backed this piece of legislation got wind that there were a lot of people raising their voices about this. And then they started a big campaign to counter us, which only proved our point and made the amendment such a political hot potato that the Joint Conference Committee decided to get rid of it. Now, why did they get rid of it? Was it because it was unconstitutional? Was that the reason they gave? No. It was legislation not appropriate to the bill to which it was attached. Why did they say that? So that those powerful forces that were really trying to put forth their own limited political religious agenda would not use the fact that they were standing up for witches' rights in the next election, along with a lot of Satan-mongering and other misconceptions thrown into the works to undermine people's quest to get reelected. So this was a politically expedient way to get rid of the offending legislation and still make it safe for people to be able to go and do their campaign. I really hope we get to a place in America where people can stand up for rights for witches and Wiccans and Druids and heathens and other pagans without it being a political liability. But unfortunately, in some places, it still is. So what's happened in 25 years? Well, first of all, we won that one. So that was a great thing. And it was the first piece of anti-witch legislation that was attempted to be passed in America. But it was also the first time that we as a larger community came together and fought a battle for our rights together and won. And it made national news. Not only right in time for Samhain, Days of the Dead, All Saints, All Souls Day, and yes, Halloween. It was out on national TV news. It was in major news magazines that this victory had happened. A very positive thing. Well, as a result of that networking, it became apparent to me so many people had come forth to work on this that we really needed to continue to stay connected with each other. So that group of people from all these different paths that we had been networking with was called the Pagan Strength Web. And then years later, its name became the Lady Liberty League as it grew in scope and not only worked within America but around the world. So that was a good thing that came out of it. A hard thing that came out of it was I was one of the people that was right in the forefront of this battle. Within a few months of that happening, I was attacked by some of the same forces that attempted to get the legislation through. They were not happy that they were defeated. And they joined forces with some bigoted people in the local area and attempted to use zoning laws to drive Circle Sanctuary off of its 200 acres of land. They claimed that we needed to get special zoning in order for us to continue to prey on our land. They said that because we had remodeled part of our barn, that was the use that we had changed the use of the building, so therefore that was the technicality they used for us. However, when it came to remodel the barn, we made no secret of it. We went to the local officials and said, we're going to remodel the barn, we're going to be using it for things. What do we need to do? Get a building permit? No. Do we need inspections? No. Do we need anything? No. I'll just make sure the fire inspector, takes a look at it at some point. Okay, we had the fire inspector come out. It was no problem. In our neighborhood was a remodeled barn that a commercial business was being run out of with no zoning whatsoever. So it was really clear people were picking on us because of our religion and because we stood up for pagan rights. And we angered some powerful people. We had already had some people attempt to challenge our rights to be on that land back in 1984. Some rumors went around that we were somehow some criminals or some devil worshippers or sacrificing animals or some other nonsense. No, we weren't. But they couldn't figure out any legal way to get rid of us, so nothing happened. But because we had remodeled the barn and people knew we had remodeled the barn and then this thing came out, they targeted us. So in 1986 and 1987 and finally in 1988, we won our battle to get the zoning that they claimed that we needed to have in order to continue to operate. What was it like during the heat of our zoning battle? We had people come on our land with weapons and shout in negative voices, harass us. They were drunk, they had weapons, and they were crude and rude, and not only were doing slurs against witches, but gays and people of color. And words I hadn't heard for a while, and a temperament I hadn't heard from a while. Yes, I went out, I faced them, and we diffused the situation. They went away. We had death threats. We had threats of violence against us. And it was a very difficult time. And some of the people that were connected with us chose to not come to events for a while because they did not feel safe. And yet, through all of that, a good thing started happening. Some of the people that we had worked with on the Helms Amendment, plus even more people, started coming to our aid. In fact, we had people politically who were politically conservative and politically liberal, and people in a whole spectrum in between. Organizations fund our quest for religious freedom. I haven't really told that part of the story very often, but yes, we even had some fundamentalist right-wing backed religious freedom groups give us money and support. Why? They realized that if zoning could be used to get rid of a Wiccan church, it could be used to get rid of a Christian church on land. And they started waking up and seeing the implications of this. So we had allies in many different places. And yes, there were some scary times, but there were some really good times. And many people came together. And we had the American Civil Liberties Union, Wisconsin Civil Liberties Union branch of that, provide an attorney for us. And because some illegal things were done in an attempt to run us out of town, open meeting laws were broken. When it came time to try to do one last negotiation before suing the local government, the township and the county, we let them know that we knew, and they were willing to settle. So what were these illegal things that happened? It also ties into that whole, what I call devil witch mongering. those misconceptions, that negativity, some of the same kinds of impassioned, defamatory misconceptions that had been thrown in the mix of the Helms Amendment to try to get that passed, got thrown into our zoning case. Right prior to our first zoning hearing, a meeting was held in one of the local churches. They showed some video of a national TV program that I happened to be on, and it was a positive depiction of what the Wiccan religion was about, so that was a good thing. But they also showed a video of Geraldo on satanic crime in America and interspliced them in a way to make it look like that's what we were about. And of course it got the local townspeople scared. And lies were being put out by so-called Christians who are supposed to uphold "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." Well, they were bearing false witness against their neighbors and were lying and whipping up a kind of frenzy not very different than what was part of the mix in Salem in 1692. People literally thought we were in league with the devil and their souls were in peril, as well as their livestock and their kids. And this was a very horrible kind of thing. Government officials were at that meeting. This was in violation of the open meeting law. They were conspiring to run us out of town. So when I walked into the zoning meeting with our attorney, zoning meetings are usually not very well attended unless there's a controversy. The place is packed. It's not only packed, but you could feel the tension in the air. And it wasn't quite at lynch mob level, but there was clearly the witch trial atmosphere that I had seen in the movies. Was I asked about traffic patterns? No. Was I asked about noise? Also a zoning concern? No. They wanted to know what I believed. They wanted to know if we were a real religion. And when I said yes, we are a 501c3 approved, non-profit religious organization that the IRS has given us the status for, at which point one of the government officials involved with zoning, who is there chairing this meeting, said, IRS made a mistake. You don't worship God. You aren't a real religion. And coming out of the mouths of not only the townspeople, but government people, were these attacks against our religion and our right to have equal rights in America. The local press was there to cover it, because they had heard through the grapevine that there was some things afoot in the local village of Barneveld. We were in the township of Brigham. And all they had to do was just report on what happened that night. They didn't have to slant it any way or the other, just reporting it. All of a sudden, created a media buzz even before the internet was widespread. All of a sudden, we started gathering media attention, and it became apparent that we had a PR problem, and we also had people who were totally in an emotional, bigoted space as a result of the lies spread about us. We decided to have an open house. We decided to do a very short ceremony as part of that open house so that people could actually see what we did and who we were. Some of the local people came to our open house, including somebody who was doing lay ministry at one of the churches. Well, he was the first to side with us. Other people started seeing that we were being falsely accused. And it was because of some of the people that came to that open house. that we learned about the illegal meeting that was held. We had people from many different churches in the local area supporting us. We had people from all around the country and other parts of the world from many different religions and philosophies supporting us, as well as people from many pagan traditions. So once again, we went through a really horrible ordeal, but the good news is we won. And once again, people converged. And I really would say, as a result of not only working on a federal case having to do with legislation, but working on a local and regional case having to do with zoning, it became very apparent I needed to do even more work for other people. We cannot let discrimination against our people go unchecked in society, because once people start a process of taking away rights, then more can happen. And so we became even more vigilant, even more connected, and with networking. And what I have here are just some of the cases that we have worked with over the last 25 years. These aren't all of them. These are just some that we are putting together in a document in preparation for our 25th anniversary celebration at Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve, which we'll be doing on October 30th, which was the day that the Helms Amendment was defeated. So what I'd like to do in the next few moments is read through some of these cases and victories, and then talk a little bit about the present and the future, and then do some working for freedom with that torch. We helped a group in Georgia called the Grove of the Unicorn. They had a court battle about the right for them to worship on their land without harassment. We were in the middle of our own zoning battle when that was happening, when we gave them support, 1986. In Minnesota, the Department of Corrections needed to be encouraged to recognize nature religion. And with the help of Antigua of the Covenant of the Goddess, a woman who got some of her priestess training from me through Circle Sanctuary, and the Lady Liberty League, which was the Pagan Strength Web at the time, we got it approved. Also in the middle of our zoning battle, which was 1986.
Corrections facilities as in...
Prisons in Minnesota. All of a sudden, Wiccan and other pagan ministers could go in and minister, and inmates were able to have their religion accommodated. Okay. So that was huge. And then in 1986, in the middle of all of this, there was a case in Ohio, a state prison in Ohio, man by the name of William Morehouse, a Wiccan inmate. I did expert witness testimony in the Morehouse case. Here again, it was access to clergy. Can Wiccan clergy go into an Ohio state prison? Can an inmate get access to clergy, can get access to religious literature and spiritual tools? It went into court. I testified. In fact, they sent somebody from the Attorney General's office, as well as the people defending the inmate, to Circle Sanctuary, and I did my very first deposition to be used in a court case in the kitchen of the Circle farmhouse, which went on for several hours. And I'm happy to say that while he didn't get everything he wanted, he really wanted to keep his hair from getting cut. But even though I know a lot of pagans that don't cut their hair, it was not at that time in his tradition a requirement that his hair not be cut, so we didn't get that part, but we did get the Wiccan religion recognized and the successful outcome of that case. Then there was a case in Ontario, Canada. In 1987, we went international. Someone who worked for a government agency wanted to get a Wiccan holiday off as an excused absence. And I'd been working with the Wiccan Church of Canada for some time, assisting them in their efforts to get the Wiccan religion acknowledged and recognized in Canada, across the whole Canada country. Well, this was Ontario, and because that other process was still in place, there wasn't anything established in Canada that would automatically grant that excused absence, because this person was connected with our network, and we got documents into the hearing, the civil rights hearing, in the nick of time. Literally, the documents, I was told later, arrived just as the case was being heard. They granted him his rights, and as far as I know, that was one of the first victories for pagan rights in Canada. And that was 1987, also in the middle of our quest with our zoning.